You probably all know who I am at this point, Lisa Chung, Executive Director of Tide Dallas, but I would also like to introduce to you, if you haven't already met him this evening, our esteemed guest speaker, Sanjiv Patel. Who would like to share his story. And I can tell you that it really is quite an interesting, inspiring story. I had the privilege of meeting Sanjiv just a few weeks back, and I got to hear it all to myself, and now he's going to share it with all of you as well. And why don't we go ahead and get started? And Sanjiv, if you would like to just start maybe at the beginning, tell a little bit about your background, your family, how you got interested in business.
Sure. So, hello, everyone can hear me? Does this work for everyone? It's good? Louder? Oh, and closer as well. It's the beginning of my career. So, I'm actually, you'll hear from my accent, I'm actually British born, part of that big Indian community that lives in England. My parents came to the UK in the 60s, along with many other hundreds of thousands of Indians from Africa. We were all, pretty typical immigrant families. A lot of my parents' generation went into self-made businesses, typically, convenience stores, gas stations, stuff you're familiar with here in this country, I was very fortunate that my parents put a lot of time into my education, which is great, and I think that's a very common Indian trait. I think it's something to be grateful for. I guess they took a hit for our generation or my generation. Growing up, we were always a business family. We were stacking shelves. We didn't have things. Got used to it. It sucked. And in the morning, I'd turn up to school having done about 3 paper routes and all that kind of stuff. So we're very much a strong work ethic. And I think those values instilled from a young age always sort of materialize in how you behave later on in life. I actually decided, I'm actually an accountant by profession. I'm a management accountant from the UK. I decided to become an accountant when I was about 13 years old, and my father's accountant had a Mercedes with electric windows. I never knew what they were before until I pressed the button and the window went up and down, and I figured that's where I wanted to be in life, So I actually studied in the UK, had my undergrad out there, and then really sort of is this good? Do you want me to keep going like this? Yeah. So after I graduated, along with everyone at that age, at 21, coming out with a fresh degree, I went for a very conventional job. I got a job with Coopers & Lybrand as an auditor. Having a strong feel for business and being told that, it's a good thing to have a profession behind you, whether you're a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, I felt that was the right thing to do, Sought after job, was the best job to get as an undergrad. I thought life was pretty good, and I had these big grand designs on where I thought I was headed in life, Give it about 10 months, and I actually got up and pretty much walked in one day and just quit my role. I found that, and this is something that happened later on in my career through many other roles as well, that, the lure of corporate life, and it's almost like a natural progression that comes after education, wasn't as fulfilling to someone that had more business aspirations. So I found it very frustrating being on the sidelines as an auditor, watching businesses, seeing how they do things, wanting to really be a part of that decision-making process and feeling like my hands were tied. Typically at 21, people tell you that, you have to do your time and just be in there and just put up the years on your resume and that will take care of itself and eventually you'll get your chance, and I really never really accepted that. And I think for all the moves that happened afterwards, I was always the same way, So it was a pretty tough morning telling my father that I was actually going to just quit my job and go on welfare for the next 4 months. And yet it happened, and that's what I did. And I think at the time, leaving a job like that with all the sort of the trimmings that come with it, to me it was actually a very simple decision, yet to a lot of people around me it was appalling, and it's seen as very irresponsible and all those kinds of things. But for me at the time, I knew I had a roof over my head. My parents would never kick me out, no matter what I did. And I had actually gone to the trouble of getting an education. And the reason I'm sort of stressing some of these experiences, because I think for a lot of people, that are in corporate roles, the question always comes up with how am I going to make that switch? How am I going to jump to a more self-determined business life as an entrepreneur? So I think, that the point of education is to have choices. We study to get ahead. And I think a lot of people misframe that opportunity and then they say, well, actually now I have to do this. And what I find is that despite all the opportunity that learning has given, so few people then use that to achieve their fullest potential, right? So I actually spent a long time, spent 4 months out of work after Cooper's, stumbled on a job at Toyota. They gave me a company car. I was pretty happy. They told me that every 9 months they would change it, and they gave me a pay rise, which is always nice. And I had to go into work and be an accountant. And I thought, great, I'm in a really cool business, cars. They give me a new car, get lots of money, everything looks great. And I used to go into work every day, and I used to open up a ledger, and it would be on paper, and I'd open it up like this. There'd be grids on it with all the ship names of ships leaving Japan, and the number of Corollas written in pen on this side of the sheet, and then on the other side you'd write this, whether they arrived or not, and all those kinds of things, So I did that for about all of 2 months and realized that I was just as unchallenged, and even though my resume now is starting to look pretty butchered, figured that it was still necessary to then say, no, I'm not going to do this, and I'm going to find something else. I ended up spending, a good 5 to 10 months, actually 10 months looking for work, despite being in that role and trying to do interviews. I did interviews at nights, at weekends, and all kinds of crazy stuff just to find something that would actually challenge me at a time of life when I had nowhere else to be, nothing else to do, I interviewed at Tetley, a tea company, which is now owned by Tata. At the time, it was a management buyout. And I remember going into the interview and the guy was very impressed with the resume, and I seemed to spend every interview talking about why I wasn't working at Coopers and Lybrand and why I'd taken the path I did and how bad that looks on your resume. Does that mean that you can't hang around and stuff? Eventually, in this interview with Tetley, I said to the financial controller, I said, really, I just want a job where I can break my back for the next 4 years and do whatever you want to get done and work all day and all night. It was a pretty straightforward interview, and I got the job, and over the next 3 or 4 years, they moved me around. I think in 3 years, I had 4 different positions with them. I started out in probably the most unsexiest job that one could probably have. I was a factory accountant, in there in a factory with a hairnet and a hat, trying to figure out how much a bag of tea costs, figuring out numbers. We had 3,000 items, all with different cost components and values and all this kind of stuff. And I spent the next 2 years digging around factories and counting inventory and doing all those hard things that accountants generally don't really want to do, and learnt a ton by it. I was overworked, underpaid, at the same time as working like 60-hour weeks. I used to do my accounting exams at nights and weekends in other cities, yet I thought it was the most thrilling experience I'd ever had, and it was very interesting at that time to sort of see how people who I'd left in previous environments were still not sure why I was doing what I was doing. And I'm not saying here that, I look at my career and made all the right moves or anything, but, my thing is, I feel like I've earned the right to say that it's worth your while to be a bit daring when you don't have so many commitments and you actually have some freedom. And I do think a lot of people do not actually appreciate just how much freedom they have to make some daring moves, Moving through the story, I came to the US in 2000, did my MBA up in the Northeast in Babson College, very entrepreneurship-focused school. I turned down a place at NYU, which probably would have got me into a great consulting job or a Wall Street job, and instead went to this 50th place school in Boston, Massachusetts to learn about small business management. Again, the right choice, not the conventional route. Through that time there, I actually met Stacy from Stacy's Pita Chip Company, who I would then later work for as their CFO. Now, at this point, I was 28. I had heard about this pita chip company out there, and I had a food background in me already, so I was looking to continue down that path. And it's a lot harder to find startup food businesses than it is to find a .com business, or anything else like that as a start. It's a very specific part of industry, So, and it's not typically a startup haven. So, having found Stacy, I called her up and I said, I've got nothing to do in my internship year. I'd like to just work for free. I just want to understand how you build a factory with no money. So, it's kind of interesting. All my friends said you should work for money. You need money. It's not a big name. You need to put it on your resume. I took my summer internship and pretty much just wrote it off because I did not want to take a typical corporate job, and I wanted to learn stuff. The opportunity at Stacy was one of 3 or 4 different entrepreneurial things that I tried my hand at in that summer. I worked with a lady that had a soap company. I did a few business plans. Tons of different types of things, constantly trying to put myself in the running to be a part of something entrepreneurial. It wasn't something that I was necessarily going to start myself, but even being in that environment was actually constructive and helpful to the eventual goal. Fortunately enough, a year later, after my sort of 2-week free internship, after 9/11 and what was a pretty tough graduation year from an MBA, I graduated in 2002. Pretty tough times. I bumped into Stacy randomly on campus, and she asked what I was doing, and I said, well, I'm just waiting for you to give me a job. I said, that's all I'm doing, Stacy. So, it was very unusual because we never really talked for about 8 months, and there are moments like that when you stand in front of someone and for some reason they have passed you in a corridor and you stop, you chat, and your life changes on a moment like that. And, from that brief, flippant comment, I had a job offer in about a week. I had a 5-minute voicemail on my phone when I got home the next day, and a long roundabout way of saying maybe you should come in, talk to us, and we'll start thinking about things. And before I knew it, I was a one-man finance team in a growing business. At 28, I really don't think I would have had that same opportunity in the UK. Very different kind of environment and culture of business out there. I think the thing I love about the US is that it's such a what's the right word to say it? It's such a great meritocracy. That I really find that here, if you can achieve results and it aligns with the objectives of the company, you're more likely to get a job here, regardless of any other baggage or issues that you may have, whether it's your age or lack of experience. And in the UK, I found that very difficult. So at 28, to suddenly be sort of a one-man finance team for Stacy's, I was pretty thrilled, And when I joined that company, we had just closed a year at about $1.5 million in sales. And we had about 8,000 square feet of factory. And we were making chips out of pita bread, which I can tell you, when you tell your friends that's what you do, it's not pretty cool, I had a little black and white business card that probably came from a mall machine that you print out at the screen, and at nightclubs that wasn't the job to have, when you tell people what you do. But, over the next 3.5 years, we watched this brand grow. We had our own manufacturing. Between 2002 and 2006, when we eventually sold the company, went from about 8,000 square feet as a factory to 220,000 square feet. We had close to 4 to 5 acres of in-house production space. It was pretty incredible. Our sales moved from 1 to 2 million when I joined to $60 million by the time we sold the business in 2006. And we went from having like 5 employees and people clocking off at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to go home to having 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 450 people working in a factory, and we were making big deals with Costco and Kroger and all those people. That whole period was a really great. Again, at the time, everyone kept saying, well, the risk, you lose your job if they go out of business, but it was such a thrill to be a part of that kind of experience, and at the same time not have the risk that came with ownership. And I was talking to someone earlier about this. It's sometimes, it's confidence, it's that internal voice that's telling you whether you're ready or not to do something like start a company. That I found that having this kind of a work opportunity helped me sort of reconcile that gap between my perceived needs and what I thought my skill set were, it was. Thankfully, I think about 2006, after having spent about 6 months doing a pretty intense negotiation with PepsiCo, we sold our business to Frito-Lay, and now today Stacy's is a part of the Frito-Lay business and a pretty successful brand for them. We exited. It was a nice deal. I wanted more money, but I got some, so that's okay. Very interesting situation to be in. At 31, I kind of found myself able to retire. It feels kind of disgusting saying it, but that's kind of the situation I was in, having sat there, and I thought this was amazing. I thought this was it. great, I'm just going to party my life away and go hang out on beaches, and it's just going to be, hey, Sanjiv at the bar, you know. So, and you know, it's amazing. And I thought, well, that's it, because we work for money, and money is the goal, and it's fine. I don't need to do that now. So, having done that for all of 2 months, I then spent about a year and a half trying to figure out what it was I was supposed to do in life, you know, because I thought, well, actually, you know, I was quite jaded by business, having then had such a crash course in entrepreneurship and watching the sale process and how that happens and how people change with the lure of money, and you know how political environments suddenly become very difficult to work in. You know, I'd kind of lost that interest in working. You know, I'd always been a romantic with business. You know, you work in this small mom and pop shop in the garage, and then you build it up, and we change the world, and we make, you know, history. You know, and then when you get into it, it's just like any other deal, and there's money on the table, and everyone's trying to cover their ass and get the right non-compete together, and it's just as tough as everyone else, you know, and all the people that you think you're independent of suddenly appear in your life. Suddenly you have an attorney. You know, I never knew I needed an attorney, personally, you know, to negotiate my contract, but I had one. You know, suddenly we have like investment bankers around us, you know, people in suits with ties, all that kind of stuff, and suddenly they were telling us what was happening. It was very strange, you know. And then finally, the ultimate insult, I would say, was a corporation like Pepsi turning up and sitting next to you and having someone that looks just like you with the same job title sitting at your desk, and everyone's sort of looking at you. It's like, okay, fair enough. I guess I'm going to travel Europe. So, you know, very difficult. And so in that time that I had off, I was very anti-business. I spent a lot of time thinking about charitable work, and I don't know, I was going to grow my hair down to the middle of my back and sort of live out, you know, a peaceful life, you know. And then having spent a bit of time volunteering at a charity and spending some time thinking of different projects I could get involved in India specifically, because that sounds, again, romantic, you know, go do something back for a community that we left behind, you know. I realized that I was not necessarily qualified to do any of that. Just because I had some money did not mean that I was necessarily then the right person to make decisions around aid and all those kinds of things. So suddenly I felt, and then also I realized that any organization that has more than one person is just as political as any other organization, whether it's for a good cause or for being, you know, a highly profitable venture. So non-profit did not really distance me from the natural behavior of, you know, humans, you know. And so I realized that this wasn't necessarily going to work either. The partying thing had kind of dried up and got pretty boring pretty quick, and spending money became, again, very dull. And I suddenly realized that really, you know, in a society, I think we all have to do what we're best at for the overall benefit of the overall system. And for me, I'm actually pretty good at what I do, and I kind of acknowledged that to myself, and I said, well, you know, I actually also, more importantly, quite enjoy what I do, you know, and money aside, it's actually why I wake up in the morning and go to work. It's not because I have a job and I've got to go and got to pay the rent. I was doing all of that stuff, but actually I kind of liked what I did. So I then spent quite a bit of time, and during this period I'd gone back to England, so I was kind of like a recluse back in England doing my sabbatical gardening duty, I guess, and figured that I needed to get back into things, you know. So I then surveyed the US, looked for a place that I felt could be home, and then set about trying to figure out what kind of a business I would start, because the attorney told me that, you know, I just need to start a small business that, you know, employs 2 people and you'll get your visa and that's good enough, you know. And then I was like, okay, great. So I'm going to start a coffee shop with a little bar in the back, and I'm going to day trade in the corner or something, you know. That lasted about 5 minutes as a thought, you know. And then I realized that, you know, I should probably have a go at this, starting a company. You know, it's the only thing I hadn't really done. Not the only thing, but it was like the next thing as a big challenge, where there was enough fear in there for me to say, can I really do it? Can I really make it work? And that's what, you know, I figured was a good enough commitment that would get me out of bed every day, working and feeling like I was doing something productive and giving back to the world, if you like, you know, because we all contribute to society in different ways, you know. And I just figured that even as a humble accountant, we have a role to play in the whole system. You know, and so for me, sitting out and playing Xbox 3 days a week, you know, probably wasn't going to cut it. So suddenly I found myself out there looking for a product line to grow, for a business to launch, figuring out who to work with. I figured on Dallas pretty quickly. I like this. People always ask me, you left London and then came to Dallas. I don't really understand why on days like this, especially, but I love it here. I think it's a very business-friendly city. I think the transportation networks, really the airport that's here, are very beneficial. Having sold a business and paid state income taxes, I really appreciated the benefit of being in a zero state income tax area. And starting a business again, it made sense to, again, if I was going to pick a path, I was going to pick the path of least resistance, Cost of home ownership, much more affordable here. Taxation, much better. General business pool in Dallas, Fort Worth. I mean, we're very rich here in diversity. We were just talking about this, earlier, that it's not very skewed towards one industry. So we have a lot of ancillary services, therefore, that are very very cultured and diverse. We have an employee pool that's very, again, cultured, diverse, All of those things, I think, made for a good stage in which to launch a company. I spent a long time trying to figure out what I was going to do. I looked at perfumes, I looked at gums, I looked at Crystal Light type stick drinks, I looked at peanuts. Having decided really early on that the best way to succeed on my own and have my own business was to not actually do manufacturing, to avoid the capital intensive part that comes from that and this second underlying culture that is in any organization that runs its own manufacturing. I suddenly ended up in Chicago at a Manufacturers Association trade show for people that were actually making the supermarkets. So if you're Kroger and you want to have Kroger brand detergent, you'd go to that show to find a detergent company that would actually make that product for you. Meanwhile, in the crowd, I guess there was me looking for a co-packer, someone that could manufacture a product that I felt that I could brand and build and sell. So I stumbled upon a peanut booth, and it's really quite interesting that at the end of it all, I ended up right back in snacks. And I was like, yeah, this is where I feel comfortable. I know things here, I have credibility here, I have industry experience, all the things that I wanted to run away from and get away from, actually I realized were assets to me, Then, having kind of come across, done the research, walking up and down the supermarket aisles, you have to sort of figure out how does this product set look, into the real business side of what I do now. I realized that the peanut category is very much ruled by 2 or 3 companies, which have not been particularly innovative over the last 20 or 30 years. And in food, as I was saying earlier to someone as well, I'm not going to invent a new potato, right? Or come up with a different carrot. I'm gonna figure out a different way to put those two things together. So, we look for categories where there hasn't actually been any innovation, and maybe there is some complacency, and where the consumer is actually starved of creativity. And I feel that's the opportunity for an entrepreneur. I'm not going to compete with a big corporate giant that's been in a peanut business, say, for 50 years on cost. I'm not going to be able to do things cheaper than them. I'm not going to have the scale. I'm not going to have the clout. But when it comes to marketing, to me, marketing is a game of intellect. And so I don't think that you can put 3 half brains in a room and make 1.5 brain. We always function at the highest level that one individual holds in the organization. So I feel like that's a place to compete. In the food business, if you look at things like Ben & Jerry's, Food Should Taste Good recently, Stacy's, vitamin water, these have all been products that have done really well. I think we mentioned 5 Hour Energy earlier. Products that have done really well from people that really understood how to market consumer goods and get it to the public and build distribution. So for me, we now, with my new product, Lord Nut Levington Peanuts, we're really trying to do something creative in what I would see as a very sort of stale category. It's tough work, I'm self-invested. There's no more retirement. And I guess this has to work if that's ever going to happen again. But I'm happier for it. I think it's been an interesting journey. I'm happy that I can sit back and say to people that I'm not actually crazy, that I did things for the right reasons, because I wanted to work hard and I wanted to learn, and that at some level it's been helpful. I wouldn't say paid off because this is still a long story, but I think if I was to share that story with people, I think the key thing is to say to everyone, if being an entrepreneur is truly your goal and it's something you truly aspire to, then there has to be stuff that you're doing, sacrifices that you're making now, no matter where you are, whether you're in a career, corporate job, or whatever, that is somehow getting you towards to that goal and closer to starting your business. Whether you are reconciling a skills gap, maybe you need to learn an industry more, maybe you need to be around an entrepreneurial business, but if some stuff like this is just not going to land on people's laps, it's a lot of daring, I guess. It's a lot of understanding of risk. Risk is one of the hardest things to deal with when starting a business. I think a lot of us overlook, though, just how safe we are in taking risks. I think for young people, I should say you, are in a great position to try different things, be brave, and I don't think enough people take that chance. And so it's kind of ironic in a way that for my community, I've come from an entrepreneurial generation that were dumped into a new country and having to sort of fend for themselves and forced to evolve. That generation has bred, if you like, a bunch of very educated people, very effective, very successful, yet at some level the need for entrepreneurship has been removed because the urgency of having to put money on the table independently is now out of the question. So I think that a lot of people in corporate roles probably don't realize just how much is out there for them and how much they can really achieve if they actually were to step back and look at things and take more of a long-term view. I find it kind of disappointing at times, and I'm going to say this is going to make me sound like an old man, but to see people that are in their 20s just doing their time, yet having all the bravado of wanting to run a business, yet not really doing anything that's going to get them there, and it's harder to make changes later on in life. When you have more commitments, it's harder to take risks. And I think there's a saying, isn't there, that youth is wasted on the young. Often I think we don't realize just how lucky we are to be in a country where we can get fed, get paid, don't go to jail. We have freedom, and we have a good legal structure, and it is actually possible to start a business.
You thought you would have done this 10 years before?
Did I think I would have done this?
Repeat the question.
So I forgot your name. Sashi, right? Sashi, sorry. He asked if I thought I would have done this 10 years ago. Now, let me ask you, do you mean that I would have started a business 10 years ago, or if someone had said to me 10 years ago that I would be doing this now, would I have believed them? What's the question?
My question is like, is it age related or what? Is something age related? Do you think like, I would have done this 10 years before I'm in the business?
Okay, I mean,
I would be this person 10 years before.
Okay, so 10 years ago, I think the barriers to me starting a business were confidence, right? Industry knowledge, and some form of financial backing, right? And I used to look at those things. I mean, the opportunity is important, right? I'm not saying it's not, but we also need skill sets to launch a business effectively and execute well. I think at that point, I don't think I would have been ready. If you had asked me, do I think eventually I'll be running a business or starting a company? Absolutely, because I always had that as my determined goal. But I spent my time in those 10 years trying to deal with the issues that were stopping me start a business. And I was saying this also earlier to someone that, if it's a confidence issue, we have to look at ourselves and say, is that real? Are we right to be anxious? Do we really have a skill set problem or a resource problem that is stopping us doing something? And then, and this is the point that I'm trying to make, is to then devote our time to making these gaps narrow, right? So for me, it was working in industries where I would learn as much as possible, in jobs where I would learn as much as possible, regardless of the risk of the job or the long hours. I think it's a great saying, I think it's Jack Welch, he said it's far more important to be employable than it is to be employed. And I think that's the spirit of what I was trying to do in those 10 years, is to really deal with the fact that I wasn't confident enough to start a business and say, right, what do I need to do? Maybe I need to work on my confidence. Maybe I need to work on my skill set. Maybe I need to figure out a way to amass some money to be able to do something without having to rely on other people. So, is that, sorry.
Right here on the white shirt.
Okay, sorry, yeah. Oh, okay.
Borrow the mic so everybody. Well, congratulations on growing Stacy's tip from 2 million, you said, to 60 million, whatever.
Yeah, thanks.
And so, congratulations.
It wasn't my business, but thank you.
It would be really interesting to find out a little bit more specifics about what did Stacy Chips do to grow to 60 million. We would really love to hear that. And what exactly was your role in growing that? We would like to really
Okay.
hear that from you. Is some specifics, 2 or 3, 4 things that you and Stacy did?
Okay. So everyone heard that. You had the mic, right? So Stacy's was a very intense experience. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. When our business was growing in triple digit every year, we were at least doubling and some years tripling our sales. We had our own manufacturing. So if you imagine now that we're doubling and tripling and suddenly now we have to double and triple the amount of steel on the floor outside in the manufacturing area, and then at some point we run out of concrete to put it on, then have to find somewhere else to build a factory. Very tough situation. It's very successful, but it's a very high octane pace. In terms of the business, we had a great product. We had great people. I think that's very important. The ownership, I mean, I was a CFO, so I won't claim to take the credit for Stacy's or myself or anything. But we had 4 or 5 people, probably 4 of us at the top of the business running it. Stacy, her husband, or ex-husband eventually, Stacy's brother, and then myself. That team was very important. None of us had extensive experience, but we had a lot of commitment to the business and a lot of, good, intelligent thinking to be able to sit down, break problems down, and resolve them. So, product's important. The branding was right. The timing was good. Having a healthy item is also helpful. I think having a healthy, indulgent snack is like food nirvana, because it's not easy to do. I think we did that. I think we were unique. The fact that we had our own production meant that we stayed unique because no one else could figure out how to do this. And then, and I think this is an important point to understand in business that I feel like I've been educated on. It's great to be smart. It's wonderful to be analytical and have the answers. But it really is much better to be lucky, And, I hate saying that because it makes it sound like a cop-out. But in many ways, we have to encourage both. We have to do everything we can to be smart, but at the same time understand that at some level it comes down to a numbers game, and you try and have as many open opportunities out there as possible in the hope that things actually bite for you. We had, just to give you an idea of where I'm coming from, in the time that I was at Stacy's, I went through 3 factory fires. And I don't know if any of you have ever worked in manufacturing, but when a plant goes on fire, it's not a very pretty sight. Potential business enders, where, I'd get a call at 3 a.m, I could hear the alarm going off, and I'd be like, I just don't want to talk to you. I don't want to hear what you're about to say. And you turn up to the plant, and I remember seeing smoke billowing out of the building, trucks everywhere, people going in with axes and stuff. It's just you're sitting there thinking, there's no way we can come out of this. Yet, we did. Now, if our cards had been stacked a different way, we maybe wouldn't have. And we would have been another has-been story, and everyone would have been wise after the event, So I do think it's important for us to understand, when we are lucky and when we are smart, if that makes any sense, So lots of great things that happen at Stacy's, great people, great brand, good timely product in terms of what people are looking for, consumers are looking for. Great CFO. But at the same time, we were very fortunate as well. And I don't think any business operates independently of that Hail Mary that's out there. I really don't. And I think, I don't know if any of you, has anyone here got a statistics background? Anyone? So if I say a type 1 and a type 2 error, would you know what I'm talking about?
False positive.
Yeah, so I think there are times when things go wrong, it's because maybe we had the wrong idea. But then there are times that things go right because we had the wrong idea, but we were just lucky, And I think we need to acknowledge that some of that stuff is out there. There are many dark. I'd be really honest. I remember seeing people of our team crying. It's a very humbling experience to go through some of these things, knowing that everything that you've committed to and put all your time in is about to just vanish. And I think ultimately internally there is this human element that kicks into gear, and we strive and try and make things right. But we can't avoid the fact that things happen that are out of our control as well, you know? And I think there is a way to play that, and I think we can be opportunists and play the numbers game to stack the deck in our favor. But at the same time, you know, we can also be smart and hope that we actually preempt some of these events as well. Is that enough detail for Stacey's, or is that?
I have one more question.
Yeah, all right.
Go for it. Okay. You said with your business that you're doing now, you do not want to do manufacturing, yet Stacy's was a big manufacturing, so
Yeah.
I heard you said there was a fire and all that, but
Four
other than
fires.
that, what other reasons would you not go for manufacturing, especially when Stacy's was such a big success?
Okay.
And it was a manufacturing.
Yeah, understood. So there are a number of issues in this, right? So, but it was, if you like, the first decision I truly made in starting my company now was not to manufacture. Before I'd even decided on peanuts, I knew I did not want to manufacture. It's a very capital intensive process, right? So suddenly, instead of investing in brand, I'm investing in steel. So if I buy an oven for $500,000 and put it on a floor somewhere, I can only sell that tomorrow for 20, 30 grand, maybe 100 grand. You know, it's on the books of some sort of historic accounting measure, but I've already made my gamble and I hope it pays off. Now, that would have, if I had gone down that path, it would have changed my independence. You know, I would not necessarily have owned my own company because the financing need would have been different. So that's one thing. The second thing is the commitment that comes with manufacturing. You know, if I said I'm going to do peanuts and therefore I have to start a plant, I can't halfway through that say, you know what, I want to do chips. You know, it's done. You've jumped out the plane and the only thing you can do is pull for your chute, you know? So the commitment that came with that, I saw as a negative. So I think the important thing, and this kind of goes down the path of real options thinking. If any of you have been in academia recently, you know, some decisions you can defer, right? With Stacy's, there was no one else out there making pita chips, so they don't really have that option. They had to do this, right? Good for them that they succeeded, you know? I can come back to that manufacturing decision at a later date and actually own that and rule that process as opposed to trying to do it now in a way that I'm not necessarily prepared for. The other thing, and I think this is important as well, when I looked at myself as my honest assessment of my skill set, I am not the guy who's going to pick up a wrench and go up to something with a gas line running into it. It's not going to be me. And I don't have anyone around me that is that kind of person. When I look at the Stacy's people, we had a couple of mechanically sound people in there who were willing to get in and sort of, you know, touch the electrical circuit, not knowing what's going to go on, you know, next. You know, that's not me. So if I look at me, I say, well, that's not my skill. I'd rather outsource that. There is plenty of available capacity out there for what I'm trying to do. I don't need to own that. Now, if I was doing something unique, do any of you know the Sahale product, the Sahale nuts, the sort of seasoned, and I'm a food nerd, but you know, if you go to Starbucks these days and you find at the counter there's actually those cashews that are in pomegranate, and I don't know if that makes sense next time you go have a look for it. The company behind that is a couple of chefs, and they understand machinery, and there's no one else that can make that product but them. So they didn't have that option. You know, I think I have an option that I can take that decision in 2 years, 5 years, you know. So that's quite a big part of it as well, you know. So the last thing, having been around manufacturing, and I've earned my stripes in that area, it's like having a separate world. When you walk inside that door into a plant, you've just entered the twilight zone. This is an alternate universe, and it works on its own metrics that happen inside, and in that realm, the factory manager is king, and you've got to understand cell working patterns, you know, bottlenecks, you know, QC issues, HACCP, OSHA, you know, FDA laws, and you know, I'm going to spend 10 years trying to understand that. Do you see what I mean? And so really also when we look at the food business, so much of it is made in an outsourced fashion. Coke and Pepsi is just a classic example. You know, it's their bottling companies that make the stuff. You know, the control of the actual ingredients, that's an intellectual property, that's owned by the people that need to own it, i.e. the mothership Coke or Pepsi, right? So I don't think people outside the industry don't realize just how many outsourced co-packers are out there making the products that they drink or eat, you know? And so I think strategically it's the right thing to do. That might change in 5-10 years if I'm still around and I have a business. then I might look at that differently.
I've got more of like one comment and then a question. All right, so first of all, your path kind of seems Zuckerberg-esque because you pretty much, that's a pretty good comparison.
That's pretty grand, actually.
Zuckerberg, he kind of, when he had Facebook, he didn't, when people approached him about does he want to sell it or not, he just like did whatever he initially wanted to do, and that's like what kind of your path is. You just did what you wanted to do, which is really, to me, is kind of, to most people, it's probably like anti-logic, because when I'm thinking about my future, I'm thinking about the best ROI, which I think is logical, but, so that's just kind of goes against my logic there. But it's very interesting. And then I also want to know what kind of marketing propelled Stacy's from being this $2 million company to a $60 million company. Like who were the consumers? How did they? Maybe like how they marketed, and if you're using any of that marketing to promote your peanut company.
Okay, thanks. So, I don't know about Zuckerberg, but thank you, I guess. In terms of the return on investment thing, and I think this is kind of gets to the crux of what I've been trying to sort of talk about. Someone said to me, a friend of mine actually said, the only ROE that matters is the return on effort, and it's time. That's our resource that we're putting into it. And so you could say, well, that's a resource that we've allocated and I want to see something back from it. So what I'm saying to you is that when I was in that position in my 20s, I was saying I can have a boring life as a 9-to-5 accountant anytime I want. I can do that whenever I want. It's always there. I got the papers, I can do it. But if I want to make it big, and if I want to do something much grander than this, I have to have open traps out there, right? I have to put myself in situations where I'm more likely to be lucky. Do you see what I'm saying? So, but if I take the tried and trusted path, which logic will tell you stay safe, it's a sure thing, then earlier on in your career where you could really afford to gamble, you've just missed that train, And so for me, it was, I know, again, it's this employable versus employed. The things that I did weren't crazy. I didn't do get-rich schemes or anything like that, right? I was always learning, I was working hard, I was building my experience and my understanding of business, manufacturing, food, So does that help frame how I see that as a bit different? And then in terms of marketing and Stacy's, it's really hard, sometimes you sit back and think, wow, that was amazing. I can tell you though that, we hit some really good traction and numbers in the club store channel. This is now getting into some really intricate sort of industry stuff, but we did a lot of business with Costco. And every new client you get is the next big client you've got, right? You go, oh my God, we just got into Shaw's, that's amazing. And then, but then we go to Costco, I'm like, this is amazing, that's not amazing. The thing that happened with Costco is that people go to a store like that, and that's been a retail success story, Costco. Very successful business, they've earned their right to be up there at the big table, right? People go to Costco looking often for entertainment items, right? If you're having an event, a barbecue, or hosting a party or something, you might go to somewhere like Costco to stock up, right? I think that success in that area, that venue, helped us have a string of in-home live demos across the US to introduce a lot of people to our products. Does that make sense? Now, I'm not saying, that's my take on it. If you're going to say, how did it work marketing, I think that's a very big part of it. And that comes down to we didn't sit there and say, well, so this is what we're going to do. We want to have a party, there's nothing like that. But again, we did the right things, and then you say, wow, some good things happened because of it. I didn't plan for that, but it happened, I think the branding was important. I think people liked the idea of Stacy as the character, as the person behind it. I think people bought in a lot to the fact that it was an entrepreneurial business, a woman-run business. I think that was a big thing. I think, again, also, though, back to this thing where in food, again, as my background would say, we have sort of the bell curve, and you can go right out here at the really healthy end and have a rice cake, right? Or then you can go down here and have a burger, right? And we've all got like some trade-offs that we make. what we hit upon with our product was a product that was somewhat healthy without being a rice cake, but at the same time, delicious, right? So we gave the consumer an acceptable trade-off for that guilt that they have of snacking and all those kinds of, desires, if you like, and what they want to also at the same time feel good eating, So, and I can tell you, and this is why I say this, Pita Chips started because Stacy and Mark had a sandwich cart on the side of the street in downtown Boston, and they had too much bread at the end of the day. They didn't sit there, right? And this is why I always say to Stacy and Mark, I said, you know what? Not one MBA student would have told you to start this business. And now they're all listening to your talk, right? So, I mean, we put ourselves into situations where we're in the game, we take some hits, we hope good things happen, Looking at it now, I understand that track. Myself, for my business, in 2 weeks I'll be up in Virginia, standing in a Costco trying to sell our peanuts for 6 days straight, to come back for a day and then go over there again and do another 6 days. It's going to be quite intense. So, I see the benefit of it. I understand it. We'll be having a club store strategy as well. I try and get myself out there a bit more nowadays because I think people are interested in the American dream, even if it is an Indian guy telling the story. So, again, I understand that. I'm making a go of that. I do also think that, we need a good product. And product development is a part of marketing, right? So I've spent a whole year on our product. I hope you like it, trying to figure out, how it's branded, how it's put together, how it tastes. Ultimately, you can do all the marketing you want, but if you don't get that right, in food, nothing else. You'll get one sale, and that'll be it. Does that answer your question? Is that adequate? Okay.
Congratulations. During the transition period, the transition is like, from your employment to entrepreneurship. That's where you decide your decision making going for your business, and you put your money, energy, and effort, and there will be a lot of fear of failure. And so, can you give us some advice or inputs? How can you motivate yourself moving forward, doing your own business? And there's a confusion state that's where it happens, right?
You're asking how do we deal with the fear of failure when we run a business, and also making that leap, I guess, to leave something. I mean, was it the fear of failure and your anxiety? Are we talking about anxiety? So, I mean, I can tell you, I probably slept about a total of 10 hours this weekend, max. I'm pretty tired. I get pretty tired. What I found so different in this situation to my previous ones is that before I could make a recommendation and say, well, take it or leave it. I told you what to do. If you don't do it, it's your own fault, Now, it's me. I have to make the trade-off, and I don't have anyone to go to. I was that person, for someone else. So I don't think that fear is, my point is it hasn't gone at all. It's something that you manage, And I can tell you one of my notes here, and I spent a lot of time thinking about what are the things that make me tick, and I try and say the Serenity Prayer every day, I mean, it sounds crazy, but, and it goes, dear Lord, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference, and that's why I talk a lot about luck, things that are out of your hand, out of your control. At some level, we have to accept that that's out there, and, if at the end of this I fail, right, I could have done all the right things and still be out of business, So at some level, you accept it, you acknowledge it, you deal with it if you can do something to minimize that risk. But at some level, I always look at it like this and say, I've committed. I can't change that. Money's gone. There's no retirement now for a few years, So it's something that I think you accept. I do think, though, that one shouldn't be reckless at the same time. I think we should listen to that inner voice as well. I was saying this to someone earlier as well. We all have that built-in psychology to tell us don't cross the road because there's cars at 100 miles an hour. I'm not going to listen to the one guy that made it across the street and then tell me that, oh, you just have to go for it when there's 90 dead bodies in the road, So we have to respect our own self-defense mechanism, and then we have to decide, are we doing this or not? And if you do it, you have to just deal with it. And I tell you, there's a very familiar look now I recognize when I see Stacy and those people from back in the day, and I feel like they looked back then, and it doesn't go away. And so, the luxury of that job that you may have, you definitely trade that all in when you start your own business. But it doesn't mean you can't do it. Ultimately, we're all capable of amazing things, but we are also at the same time human and fallible, and we at the same time have to just accept the fate that we have, because that's probably not going to be very inspiring, I think, but I think that's the only way I have of dealing with that.
Experiences. I don't mean to preempt the ED. I would like to know, from what I'm seeing from my side, that there is a great depth of sense in you as an entrepreneur at such a young age. So congratulations for that. But on the behalf of audience, we like to know 3 things our entrepreneurs need to be successful. What are those critical 3 things, if you would share with us, please?
All right.
And I'll just mention that Omsila was the gentleman who actually referred us to Sanjiv Patel. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Some nice words. Thank you very much. First disclaimer, right, is I have successfully become an entrepreneur, but I haven't been yet a successful entrepreneur. Does that make sense? Right? So I have a long track ahead of me, okay? But from my understanding, and I had a few things that I wrote down for myself earlier. I still think, and one of the points that I have here, and I said it and I'm going to say it again, is to know the difference between smart and lucky and encourage both, right? Luck can be managed and stacked in your favor. I think that's a very important thing that entrepreneurs have to deal with, I think understanding risk is a very important attribute. I take my hat off to people that do well in life and are successful, but the outcome doesn't necessarily validate their decision making, And so I think understanding risk, what's at stake, what is the true sort of, what's the right word? Your sort of down to the bare bones consequences that are actually possible in this thing. If you look at my decision of, say, leaving some of my earlier jobs, people may have said that was risky, but like I said, I had a place to sleep, I had food on the table. It didn't seem that risky to me, Yet other things that seem quite pedestrian to people can actually be very risky, So I think understanding risk as an entrepreneur, because we put so much of ourselves on the line, we are the last person in the line that's going to deal with all the consequences of our decision. I think understanding risk and what is true risk, very important. And then I think the last one, it's all touchy-feely, I guess, but life goes way beyond money, career, and business. And I think I remember back in the day when I used to be an auditor, I audited a Unilever company, and they those days used to sit people down with psychologists on their interview. And it was very interesting to hear what they looked for when they're hiring people. And they said, we're looking for people for whom work is an inconvenience. And to me, it was totally illogical, because I was like, I want to work every day and every night, and I'm the best, and I want to do that, But really, having that work-life balance and being able to put what you're doing into perspective is what's going to keep you rational and making sure that you're capable of saying, this is too far, we're not going any further, I'm done, And so, we need things to keep business in perspective, whether it's family or wanting to do it for a bigger purpose. I think that's all very important. I don't think greed is the ultimate goal, Is that okay? It's 3, right? Any other questions? Just so I get to say this, I brought a lot of peanuts today. Right? So, take as many as you want. I certainly don't want to take any of them home. I hope you enjoy the product. It's part of my life in every one of those cans. So.
And I think it's part of its marketing strategy to get the peanuts out into consumers' hands. So, not only try them, but like them, continue to buy them. I'd like to thank Sanjiv Patel very much for sharing
Thank
his
you.
story with us this evening. Can we have a round of applause, please?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We do appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you to Om for sending him our way. Appreciate that as well. Always looking for great speakers to have at our events. Please, if anyone knows of anyone that they'd like to recommend, send them our way. Appreciate that. We're starting a new breakfast seminar series at Thai Dallas, in which our esteemed charter members are sponsoring seminars. We're starting out just bi-monthly. Our very first kickoff event will be coming up on July 12th, which is a Thursday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Maju Ahuja from Ahuja and Clark is our first charter member to sponsor this event, and I'm going to need to read the title because I can't possibly memorize this. It's Foreign Income, Assets, and Bank Accounts, 2012 IRS, OVDI, Amnesty, and Compliance. And please have a look. There's more details about what this event entails on our website. After that, our next happy hour event is July 19th, thank you, Hemant. August, we have a Twine event coming up, which Twine, you may or may not know, is our women's group. We'll have an event which also includes men. September, a happy hour, the third Thursday in September, and we're having a TaiCon Dallas, which right now is tentatively scheduled for Saturday, October 6th. So we're very excited about that. Plans are in the works, so please look for these upcoming events. And once again, thank you so much to Sanjiv.
Thank you. Can I say thank you?
Thanks for coming to hear this. I hope people got something out of it. I feel a bit guilty that I caused you to pay to be here, but my contact details are on our website. If I can be of any help to any of you, by all means drop me a line. So thank you very much for listening patiently, and I hope you got something out of it.